Okay, so continuing The Unknown Reality, Volume 2 by Jane Roberts, a Seth book. So this is continuing session 711. Alright, so Seth states, Rupert acts as a receiver when I speak, and so I must make certain adjustments so that my message can be channeled under conditions that involve, among other things, his nervous system and physical apparatus. That evening, through using what I call interior sound, I let Rupert become acquainted with the power at my disposal so that he could realize that I did basically now come from beyond his personality as he understands it. In regular sessions, as now, he and I again both make adjustments. And so in sessions, I am what I call a bridge personality, composed of a composite self. Rupert and I meeting and merging to form a personality that is not truly either of us, but a new one that exists between dimensions. Beyond that is my real identity. Rupert does extremely well with interior sound, and so I use that method rather than, say, an image to make my independent existence known. Now, Rupert called me originally at unconscious levels because he was upset with, quote, Earth programming, end quote. He thought that you needed some help from the outside, so to speak. That intent set up certain signals that reached into other realities or stations, and I answered. I was not speaking to Rupert personally when he heard me, but addressing myself to the world at large in a program that was indeed picked up by others. This program spread out and was translated by others in dream states. In physical terms, however, the message given that evening is still to be presented through these books. Now, in your local programming, you have hosts of familiar characters, and at different times in your terms, you have them play different roles. They take different roles. These often represent strong idealizations alive in the private and mass psyche. Let me give you a brief example that will also show you how well I have learned your culture. In their own ways, these are heroes representing the detective who is out to protect good against evil, to set things right. Now, these characters exist more vividly in the minds of television viewers than the actors do who play these roles. The actors know themselves as apart from the roles. The viewers, however, identify with the characters. They may even dream about the characters. They have their own kind of super life because they so clearly represent certain living aspects within each psyche. The aspects are personified in the character. Through the centuries, in your terms, there have been different personalities, some physical and some not, with whom the species identified. Christ is one of these. In some respects, the most ideal detective in a different context, however, out to save the good and to protect the world from harm. In certain ways, man also projected outward the idea of a devil or devils, and for somewhat the same reasons, so that he could identify with what he thought of as the unsavory portions of the psyche as he understood them at any given time. In between, there are a multitude of such personalities, all vividly portraying parts of the psyche. These characters become portions of the inner literature of the mind. Suppose an inhabitant from another reality saw one of those 3 programs and realized that people were watching it. pretend he wanted to add more depth to the show. He might then come on himself in the guise of the hero detective, but enlarging upon the characterization, adding more dimension to the plot. So often when some personality from another station wants to help change the programming, he comes on in the form of a personality already known in fact or fiction. However, you must realize that that personality is larger than fact or fiction. Quote unquote it is independent at its own level, yet it is also a part of the portion of the private and mass psyche that it so represented. I am Seth in those terms. There are many myths connected with my name. They all represent portions of the psyche as they were understood at various times in man's history. Those portions were originally projected out of the psyche as it began to understand itself, and personified its abilities and characteristics, forming superheroic characters of one kind or another, to which the psyche could then correspond and relate. Okay, so that is the end of dictation, but Rob inserts right here, and Jane as well. Rob states that several hours later, Jane told him that during the night she kept waking up with ideas she thought were connected to unknown reality. When he asked her to write down what she could remember of them, she produced these items, with whatever distortions they may contain. So this is what Jane can remember from that night. And in other books it mentions that Seth is basically like giving Jane a download. Like she's being downloaded at night. And then she has to translate that and be able to come through with the Seth character or personality. But there's more to that. I hope I didn't distort that. But anyways, this is what she remembers. She writes, number 1, some of the hypnagogic images you see in your mind prior to sleeping and those at other times are alternates. That is, you could see those pictures physically if you opened your eyes, instead of the ordinary reality you know is there. Inner vision evolves physical sight, lining up exterior data into the kinds of images that correlate. Number 2, she writes, each reality is surrounded by its probabilities, but this is obviously relative. Number 3, she says, our experience of the present is enriched by our memory of past perceptions. In some systems, it works the other way. Inhabitants are aware of the future as we are of the past. On the other hand, their memory of the past fades almost at once. And number 4, she says, again, I received information on Atlantis only to forget it right away. So right here, Rob's noting that Jane also came through with material about Atlantis right after the 708th session was held, and that would be in Appendix 14. And he's just basically saying that it's happened before, after the 711th session was held, or the night before. And he's wondering if talking about Atlantis helps her to pick it up. Alright, so I'm going to put in the description what Seth briefly discussed about space travel for Note 2. Space travel into another probability. Going down to Note 6, Rob states, about Seth's reference to the myths connected with his name, Set or Seth was an Egyptian god of evil with an animal's head, whose complicated origins could, it's thought, reach back in antiquity to at least 7500 BC. In Judaism, of course, Seth was the third son of Adam and Eve after Cain and Abel in Genesis 4 and 5. And as one correspondent wrote us, quote, Seth is also a Hebrew name meaning appointed, i.e. the appointed one, end quote. However, some very early priestly genealogies omit Cain and Abel and consider Seth as the oldest son of Adam. In the 2nd century AD, for instance, the Sethites, who were members of a little-known Gnostic sect, thought of Seth, the son of Adam, as the Messiah. Seth also shows up in writings of the ancient occult religious philosophy, the Kabbalah, which was originated by certain Jewish rabbis who sought to interpret the scriptures through numerical values. The soul of Seth is seen as infusing Moses. He was to reappear as the Messiah. Now, before I read the next part, I don't know if you guys know this, but Seth also means germ or seed, which I find the most interesting. And also Set corresponds with the setting of the sun. And some say that the setting of the sun in, say, Egyptian times was like, oh, it's this horrible thing, the death of the sun. And in the morning, Ra comes back. The sun comes back. But obviously both are necessary. And I'm about to get to a Seth quote, but first it says, Rob notes, perhaps it's been remiss on our parts, but Jane and I haven't concerned ourselves with any connections her Seth may have with ancient Seths. We don't believe such relationships exist on any kind of personalized basis, although someday we'll ask Seth to comment here. We think the name of Jane Seth came about through much more pragmatic needs. In Chapter 1 of the Seth material, Jane quoted Seth to be from the 4th session for December 8th, 1963, as that personality came through on the Ouija board, which they'd use to initiate the sessions. Okay, quote, this is what Seth said. You may call me whatever you choose. I call myself Seth. It fits the me of me, end quote. Rob continues, reincarnation had been mentioned by the 2nd session, but since the concept meant little to us, we hardly considered the many names that would be involved. Once Seth gave us a name by which to call him, we simply began using it. I'm sure that at the time, Jane had no conscious knowledge about Egyptian, Hebrew, or even Christian origins or uses connected with the name Seth. Now, Rob presents Seth in part from the ESP class session for April 17, 1973, as he answered students' questions. Okay, so Seth says, quote, so I ask you, what is your name, each of you? My name is nameless. I have no name. I give you the name of Seth because it is a name, and you want names. You give yourselves names because you believe they are important. Your existence is nameless. It is not voiceless, but it is nameless. The names you take are structures upon which you hang your images. What you are cannot be uttered, and no letter or alphabet can contain it. Yet now you need words and letters and names and objects. You want magic that will tell you what you are. You believe that you cannot speak to me unless I have a name, so I am Seth. I told Rupert from our earliest sessions that he could call me Seth. I never said my name is Seth, but I call myself Seth, for I am nameless. I have had too many identities to cling to one name. End quote by Seth. All right, then Rob continues in his notes and he says Seth treats his own reincarnational background both generally and specifically, if rather briefly on both accounts, in Chapter 22 of Seth Speaks. I'll put that link For the names of 3 of his past personalities as given in that chapter, see sessions 588 through 89. A 4th name, as well as names for Jane and me, can be found in the 595th session in the appendix of Seth Speaks. So again, if you're just coming into this video not really knowing the Seth Speaks or the Seth material, I so highly recommend that you go and listen to the audiobook of Seth Speaks or buy the book. It is imperative that you read that. But anyways, that's the end of this video, so thank you for watching.